Welcome to WorksheetCloud Grade 9 English. My name is Mrs. Nortier and I'm going to be taking you through our writing lesson today. I know that in terms of writing, it isn't really a skill in terms of how well you write. It's not a skill that a person can teach. However, the skills of how you should structure it, what content you should place where, that you can definitely teach, or I can definitely teach it to you. So that's what we're going to be doing today, is we're going to be looking at what can you do to ensure that you are reaching the capability of being able to write really well? Because that can be really difficult and it's not something that comes naturally to all of us. But if you know the structure and you know what you're supposed to be doing, it really goes a long way. Okay, so if you feel confused throughout today's lesson or something doesn't make 100% sense to you, then please do email grade9@worksheetcloud.com. There you'll be able to receive any clarity and any further information that can just help to make it very clear if you were unsure. Okay, so now that we have some of that admin out the way, let's get to today's lesson. Now, I'm going to watch a video with you guys, and the video, it's not very specific. We'll get to the specific techniques, but I think what it does is it just gives you a bit of some tips on how you can actually even start thinking about writing your essay. All right, so even though it might seem as though what he's saying, especially the topics, is very difficult and very advanced, I like what he says about how you can think about your approach just to already build some confidence.
When you write an academic paper for the humanities, one of the most important moves you make relates to your argument. This is what you mean to say. As an academic writer, you have been exposed to many different sources of information, such as research or theory, literature, or historical material. These sources contribute to your understanding of a subject. They're what I call voices. One writer's criticism or analysis of a particular topic is just one voice in the broader conversation, and with every academic topic, there are many of these voices. Your job is to say something too, to add your voice to the conversation. The first thing to do is to identify what you want to say. If you've done your reading, you'll already have some different voices floating around that contribute to your understanding of the topic. Maybe you agree with everything you read, maybe you don't. Maybe you don't know what you think. Ask yourself, what do I think about this topic? Or, how would I explain this if it was up to me? Here's your chance to make a stand. Then, say it. Chances are, much of your understanding will be related to what you have read on the subject. One of the most effective ways to express your perspective is by leaning on the voices that are already in play in the conversation. In other words, you can use those voices to help shape your own. For example, you can begin to carve out the space for your argument or interpretation by identifying something that another writer has already said about your topic, such as, Writer X argues that the American Civil War was caused by the moral and humanistic debate over slavery. In my example, Writer X is just a stand-in for any voice in the academic conversation. Usually it's best to choose a core concept from whatever source you choose so that you have a strong voice to interact with. Next, say what you think about this. You don't have to disagree. In fact, you can agree completely, or you can agree with some parts and disagree with others. The most important thing is that your voice must guide the argument. For now, let's keep it simple. For this example, let's say you have a different interpretation of the relationship between slavery and the American Civil War. You don't entirely disagree with Writer X, but you have a different take on slavery's role in the American Civil War. Begin to show your reader the difference in your argument by making a comment on X's interpretation that helps the reader to understand that you intend to argue something different. Like, while the moral and humanistic debate was clearly significant, X's assertion implies that the debate over slavery was not economic or political. Now you have set the stage to present your meaning, or your interpretation. This is your argument, and it is the statement that you will work to support as your paper unfolds. By showing that you understand Writer X's position, you can express your understanding relative to that position. You have also created a reference point with a voice that is already included in the current conversation about your topic, which, in this example, is the discussion about the causes of the American Civil War. Now, all that is left for you to do is to say what you think. Perhaps you'd write something like, "But in fact, the debate over slavery was more than just a humanistic and moralistic debate. Slavery represented a major economic factor in the young American nation, especially in the southern states. It was also a crucial determinant of political power, as representation in the House of Representatives was directly influenced by the size of the slave population in each state." Now you've laid the foundation for your paper in 3 simple moves. First, you identified another relevant voice in the discussion about your topic. Second, you directed the reader to interpret it the way that you do. That is, you offered the reader a guide to follow as you move into your own interpretation. And third, you gave your interpretation relative to steps 1 and 2 so that the reader clearly understands what you mean. And simply put, that's it. If you follow this model, you'll be on the right track. You're not done, of course, but you're set up for success.
Okay, so as you can see there, it's more about, when it comes to writing, figuring out or just having an idea before the time of where your actual opinion lies. A lot of us see a topic and we just start. We don't actually sit and go, but what do I think? If I could explain this, what would I say? And I think that's where we start to lose the way that we write, is because we get so caught up in we need to do this quickly, we need to get this for marks, and we forget that the way to get marks is actually if you are a lot more thought-provoking or a lot more contemplative about your topic. So today we're going to specifically be looking at argumentative and discursive essays. They are similar, but there's one dividing factor or difference, and that is the fact that an argumentative essay only ever looks at one side of the argument, whereas a discursive essay will look at both sides. So for the purpose of our lesson today, we're going to go with a bit of an example or a bit of an analogy. For argumentative essays, we are going to be a lawyer. All right, so that's what I want you to remember, that in terms of an argumentative essay, you are a lawyer, you are either defending or you are accusing, though obviously we're not going to be too aggressive in our approach, but you have to pick a side and you have to make sure that you argue that side so that you win. So that's why I'm using a lawyer in terms of argumentative essays. Right, so what do I write? When you are looking at an argumentative essay, it has to be, like I've said here, one side of the argument only. You must be persuasive, but you have to be factual. Right, so an argumentative essay will only get you the win if you actually provide facts. If you just state opinions, that's completely not right. That's not arguing, that's more, or rather, that's not proving your point. And you must not use contractions, personal pronouns, or emotional language. It must be very factual, very to the point, so that it is persuasive. Be very clear, right? You cannot win an argument if you are not clear. Also, you can't win an argument if you don't give examples that back up what you are trying to say. Be very specific. No one likes to hear an argument where it sounds as though the person's not 100% sure what they're saying. Then you're not going to actually win anyone over. So those are basics to remember in terms of what must I do or not do while I'm writing. Now, the introduction is where you are going to pull people in. If in the introduction you already sound unsure or you don't really come across with a clear idea, people aren't really going to listen to the rest of it or read it. And it's not going, your introduction really sets that first impression. So you have to make sure a person is focused on your essay from the beginning. In your introduction, you will make your statement, your topic, and you will provide your main points. That's all. State your topic by very clearly showing if you agree or disagree. What I mean by that is say something along the lines of COVID-19 has caused widespread panic. So you are making your claim. Or if you have to say something along the lines of academics should not be the only focus point at a school. So you're clearly making a statement and I can see which way you're leaning. And then you give me your main points. I don't want detail. I just want to know what your main points will be. Once you've done that, and guys, this is so important. Once you've done that, you are now going to write your body paragraphs, which is your essay that develops, your argument that develops. I would always suggest come up with 3 to 4 main points. It depends on your word count, obviously, but that's always a good thing or a good number with which to work. Now, your body paragraphs must, please, follow this structure. We call it peel, almost like it has layers that you're building to. So your graph will have a main point. Then you will give me an example. Then you will explain the example. And then you will link it back to the main question. So your little paragraph is almost like a mini work of its own. So your body paragraphs are all the same, and every one of them must follow the peel method. Point, example, explain, link. You can also switch around your explain and example. It doesn't really matter because a lot of the time they work hand in hand, but it has to be there. All right, so if you start following this type of structure when it comes to argumentative or discursive, or later even your literature essays, you will never go wrong with the structure. All right, then we all know you have to conclude your essay. When you conclude, briefly sum up your main points again, but then provide some type of global outlook which ends your argument. So it's almost like that final point that you are bringing across to show that you are right. This is the argument. No one can go against you. All right, so let's practice. We're going to look at school uniforms and we're going to make a decision. Do we think school uniforms should be at schools? Is it right that you're expected to wear a uniform? Or no, do we think that they should be banned? Now, I know this is probably going to sound to you as though I'm being a bit biased, but I'm going to go with the fact that school uniforms should be in class, or should be at school rather. And obviously I have to make a decision. That's the decision I chose. If you think the opposite, that's fine. Then while I'm giving examples, think of the things you would have written down. But I'm going to, for the purpose of our practice, I'm going to say school uniforms should be worn every day at school. Right, now I have to come up with my main points. So this is my introduction now. So I'm going to say school uniforms should be worn at school every day. Schools enforce discipline and keep control in the school. They provide a sense of unity between the learners or among the learners. Also, fewer items in a uniform need to be purchased. So therefore, there are fewer expenses than a different civies day every day. Finally, school uniforms put everyone on an equal playing ground with no judgment. So there's my introduction. I've given my topic, my stance, the way I feel or what I think, and then I've given my 4 main points. Now I need to develop each one of these in a body paragraph where I peel the layers. So I'm just going to do one example because what you do for one, you do for all. I'm going to look at the no judgment example. So this is how, or this is rather an example of how you could then write it. So Peel says we first need to have a point P. So school uniforms provide an equal perspective. That's my main point. Now I need to give an explanation. So I'm saying here, everyone is wearing the exact same clothing and no one wears anything that is different. Now I need to give an example. One cannot be judged for your blazer. Sorry, that's a tense error. I hope you picked up on it. One cannot be judged for your blazer in terms of brand name or cost, as every single person is wearing the same blazer. So there's my example. I'm bringing in the blazer and I'm saying if everyone's wearing the same one, then you can't judge. Now I need to link it back. This means that no learner is judged and made to feel inferior because of a clothing item. So I've stated my point, I gave my explanation, I then furthered it with an example, and I followed it up finally with a link back to my topic. All right, so that's what I mean there by the peel paragraphs. We need to conclude your argument. Remember, your conclusion is definitely something that's going to leave that lasting impression. So whereas your introduction is your first impression, your conclusion is your lasting impression. Now, the best way to conclude, like I've said, is to sum up your main points again, but briefly. Don't repeat, there's no need for it. And then take your argument and give that final closing statement. Something along the lines of, for school uniforms, we've now argued, we've shown that we think school uniforms do have a place in society. So now let's take it much bigger. We can end by saying, therefore, the education system would be failing learners if school uniforms were eradicated. So we're looking at much bigger what will happen if no one listens to my argument. Right? So it really does give that final punch, that final ending that is going to mean that someone actually might be swayed by what you have said. All right, now discursive essays, we're going to now move away. We're not lawyers anymore. For a discursive essay, we need to be the judge because a discursive essay looks at both sides. I now need to consider all sides of the argument, and I need to think clearly, where does my side lie? So, a discursive essay is a discussion. It's not an argument, it's a discussion. Both sides are given a fair hearing, and it ends in a conclusion where we now say what we think. After we've assessed everything, which way do we now go? So we've been a lawyer, we've argued, now we're a judge where we need to decide. What do I write? Pretty much the same in terms of your argumentative style. You still have to be persuasive and factual. You still can't use any contractions, personal pronouns, no emotional language. You still have to be clear and specific. And you still give examples, but just remember you're debating or discussing. So don't try too hard with one side and not the other. It has to be a fair hearing. Okay, so introduction. We can't now this time for the introduction make a statement because at the beginning of our essay, we don't yet know where we're going to end up. So rather pose your topic as a question. I'm sticking with the school uniform one topic. So instead of saying school uniforms should not be banned, now I'm going to ask, should school uniforms be banned? I'm asking a question which shows that I'm going to now debate both sides, and I have to have balanced main points. Body paragraphs, exactly the same. All right, so you still give your points, evidence or explanation, an example, and link back. None of that has changed. The conclusion, little bit different. For the conclusion, you will still sum up your main points, but now you must show what you think the most accurate decision is. So you've been the judge and you've weighed up your consequence. When you give your opinion, though, be careful to not, again, slip into any type of emotional language. Okay, so like we did, let's practice. We're still looking at the school uniforms concept, but now we have to look at both sides of the arguments. With your introduction, as we've said, you will pose a question. You'll still give your main points, but remember to show now that you're looking at both sides. So you would say, should school uniforms be banned? Question mark. There will definitely be a lack of judgments and fewer expenses for the family if school uniform remained. However, school uniforms take away individuality and comfort. So you must show in the introduction with the word however, although, that there are now two sides to this. Again, I'm going to do exactly the same with our Peel paragraph. Let's look at taking away individuality, just so you know again an example of how you can develop. So I'm giving my main point. School uniforms, this is the previous one we wrote about judging. So you still have your exact same concept. You first show your side of the argument where you agree. You show how a person could possibly agree. But then you also have to show in another paragraph how it's now a balanced argument. So let's look at my point. If every learner wears the exact same uniform, the concept of freedom and individuality is omitted. So there's my point. Now let's explain and example. A learner should feel independent and able to express himself or herself. Style and clothing are often worn to show a person's sense of self. Therefore, link, learners should be allowed the opportunity to choose their own daily clothing. So I gave my for the arguments and I gave my against the arguments. Still balanced, still fair. Now for my conclusion, I again sum up my main points, but now I have to provide where I've gotten to. Remember what I told you, my opinion is that school uniforms should stay. So you would end off by saying, after careful consideration, it is beneficial for learners and their self-morale to have school uniforms instead. Right, so I'm thinking I don't want them to be judged. I don't want families to suffer from having to buy 5 different sets of clothing every day. All right, so I've debated. Now I get to the end and I make my decision. Guys, so the main thing that I think you just have to remember from this is that argumentative writing, you're a lawyer. You want people to believe or know what you have to say. When you get to discursive writing, you're the judge. And you're now weighing up all the options. All right, so I hope that those analogies helped you, and I hope that you were able to learn from today's lesson the techniques and the structures behind writing an effective argumentative or discursive essay. Thanks for watching Grade 9s. This lesson was brought to you by WorksheetCloud. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys again very soon.